Something very mysterious is going on that I want to talk about today, namely around the media coverage of the war. Something weird is going on. Now, before I dive into my observations on that, quickly go over the headlines. Explosions in Kiev, 3 Russian hypersonic missiles targeted Kiev. Of course, Kiev denied it, even though there were blasts reported. The U.S. has lifted the ban on the Azov Brigade, commonly affiliated with Nazi far-right ideology. The Polish minister has estimated that there are 100 nuclear weapons in Kaliningrad. There's been a game of cat and mouse off the coast of Florida with Russian warships and submarines, a nuclear-powered submarine, and the U.S. Navy and the Coast Guard. Russia has entered the second stage of their nuclear exercises along the border of Ukraine with Belarus. Shots were fired on the North Korean border. Russia is about to change its nuclear doctrine, and there have been test flights of F16s into parts of Ukraine already, namely Odessa. Also, the U.S. today called on NATO countries to prepare for a protracted war with Russia. Now, something is not right. There are 3 fundamental, axiomatic truths as they pertain to the analysis of media from the eyes of a prepper. One of those things is that we are closer to nuclear war than ever before in history. Every single expert will say that. Now, does that mean that we're close, as in we're 1 minute away from midnight? That's a subject of debate. But what isn't a subject of debate is that we're closer than we ever have been before, even during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because there's a variety of extraneous factors that were present then that are not present today that were actually mitigating factors. And they had the effect of de-escalating the situation rather quickly. And of course, Russia didn't have a nearly comparable nuclear arsenal like they do now. In fact, there's a superior right now. That is axiom number 1. We are closer to nuclear war than ever before. Number 2 is that the media is ignoring this, completely ignoring this. That's obvious to anybody who is, if you just go on any mainstream media, even European media. There was a time when European media tended to be far more nuanced in their coverage and far more upfront and center on the front page of their coverage of the Ukraine conflict in particular. Now it appears that you really have to do some digging, especially in American media. Now, what is on the front page is the Gaza crisis. Now, you might ask, why is that on the front page and not the Ukraine crisis? Well, the answer is simple. That's a political issue. The issue with Russia and Ukraine is an economic, existential one for the West. And that is why you don't hear about it. You don't hear about the fact that we are closer to nuclear war than ever before on the mass media. Those are 2 facts. Another fact is that we know that they've lied, and when I say they, I say that very tongue-in-cheek. I'm not speaking of anyone in particular. Perhaps we can just say the government. There is a historical precedent to put the state over the interests of the individual. The state's interests supersede that of the individual in times of crisis, or always, for that matter, you could say, but definitely in times of crisis. In order to ensure continuity of government, sometimes they lie to us for utilitarian reasons, the noble lie, for our own good, and other times they lie to us just because they want to consolidate power and make money. So those are 3 fundamental things that we know, that they're going to lie to us during times of crisis, and arguably they've lied about the biggest crises, be they wars, economics, viral pathogens. Okay, the biggest lies tend to come out during the biggest crises. We know that the media is ignoring the fact that nuclear war is closer than ever before. You put these three things together, and you really have to ask yourself, why are we talking about Hunter Biden? I mean, really, why are we talking about a drug-addicted individual who partook in all manner of debaucherous activities? Why are we concerning ourselves with that one individual? Yeah, sure, he's, related to a politician. I mean, why are we talking even about the Gaza crisis? To be brutally honest, yes, it's a humanitarian issue. Yes, we are funding it with our tax dollars. And sure, people have a right to be outraged. And there's all kinds of contention on all sides. But really, in the grand scheme of things, the big elephant in the room here is what they're trying to take attention away from. Clearly. They clearly don't want people to know that there is a pending clash between NATO and Russia when the F16s enter the fray in Ukraine. They're trying to take attention away from that. Why do you think that is? Well, I think it's because if and when some major flashbulb event occurs, it is going to be starkly contrasted by the seeming tranquility of things as presented by the mainstream media. Everything appears to be fine. Yeah, there's some slight volatility. In fact, the volatility index is very low right now. There isn't a whole lot going on if you were to turn on Western media, that is. Even though we know, based on our own algorithmic filter bubble that we're all trapped in, that things are definitely happening. Now, there is a disconnect that has happened, a divergence between social media news and mass media news. And the greater this divergence, I call it I just thought about this, the civil volatility factor, the civil volatility ratio, the degree to which public opinion, like true public opinion, diverges from what the mass media is programming, well, that's an indicator of pending unrest. And right now, because you might not realize this, but what's showing up in your home feed, what's showing up on your homepage in any social media service at this stage of the game, is programmed by an algorithm, and it's based on your search history. It's based on a combination of your preferences and whatever other sensors they're able to tap into to extract information about your personality to serve you up more of what they think is going to gin up more engagement. We might think that the majority of people think like we do on this channel, but they don't. 99% of people have no idea that there are nuclear exercises currently underway proximate to Ukraine, and that NATO fighter jets, likely with NATO pilots, are about to send cruise missiles into Russia. Okay? Most people have they couldn't even still probably not figure out where Russia or Ukraine is on a map. And that's a terrifying thought, because the most important of those rules that I initially laid out is that if there is going to be a major crisis, they are not going to tell us. And the conditions have never been more perfect for that right now. You have the majority of people completely oblivious to the fact that we're on a razor's edge with this potential nuclear crisis. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, people were in a panic. People were panic buying. There's video footage of it back then. There wasn't a lot of video back then, but the video shows people panic buying during that period of time. And at that time, arguably, during the Cold War, there was a culture of preparedness that wasn't taboo, because of course there was this shroud of mystery surrounding the use of nuclear weapons. And of course, the memories of that have completely atrophied in this generation. In fact, most young people have no idea how a nuclear weapon works, what radioactive fallout is, and what the after effects are going to be. And it would appear, I did a little search on Google Trends, that World War III, that phrase, World War III, you would think that it's becoming more popular, right? But it's actually not. It's nearly at an all-time low, in fact. Even though in this filter bubble that we're all in, all 200,000 of us out of how many billion, you would think that World War III would be trending, but it really isn't. If you actually look at it, World War III as a search topic peaked pre-COVID during the Soleimani assassination. Now, it wasn't nearly as enduring as the spike that happened after Russia invaded Ukraine. That was a bit more protracted. The search interest was, a bit more spread out. Not as high, though. Not nearly as high as when the Iranian general, who I guarantee you, even I didn't know about, admittedly, before that, was assassinated. So, 99.9999% of people had no idea who this guy was, and they were quick to search up World War III. Why do you think that was? Why is it that there's a diminishing interest in something that we are most likely to encounter right now? Is that by design? Is that just because we're desensitized? I had a friend message me and say that they thought that World War III was something that the elites were just using as a way to concentrate more power and take away more of our rights and freedoms, that whole thing. The fact is, though, they aren't. They're not talking about it at all. We are talking about it because we got to go searching for the actual news, the actual stuff that is going on. They're talking about it in Eastern media. They're not talking about it in Western media. And in fact, you could probably have another factor or ratio. What is the divergence of East and West media? The more they are harmonized, likely that's an indicator of peace and prosperity, global prosperity. Yet, we're told that the markets are at all-time highs, even though you have this clear divergence into a multipolar world between East and West. So what this tells me is that this is far and away the most dangerous period of human existence ever. And that's just World War III. That's not talking about all of the other polycrises, meta-crises. Choose your buzzword of the day. That's just talking about the war, which nobody is talking about except within this little filter bubble. And it's important for people to really understand that what you're seeing is not what the world sees. It's easy to believe that what's on my feed is generally, you would think, generally what other people are seeing, but nothing could be further from the truth. It is no way, you take one person, sit them next to somebody who watches like one normalcy Norman, and you compare their feed to somebody who watches this channel and revolves in this circuit of information, and I guarantee you it's going to be night and day. The other person will be absolutely stunned if you were to put them in front of that. Now, is that by design to keep people compartmentalized and in the dark about these things? It could possibly be, because it's a very convenient way to manage public opinion as they run up this crisis to the point where Russia is going to be provoked. Because this is an existential war. This is about money. This is about global power. Why do you think they're dumping? Just think about this. Why do you think they're dumping hundreds of billions of dollars into the Ukraine conflict? Yet, maybe not necessarily a fraction of that. If you look at over time, it's been a lot more to Israel. But just in general, it's a lot less to Israel, okay? And yet Israel has all the better weapons. Why do you think they're putting so much money into what's going on with Russia? Because this is World War III. This really is World War III, even though that's trending at an all-time low. Now, what's going to happen then when the big event happens? Everybody's going to just be caught off guard. They're going to presume that this was unprovoked, that the Russians just acted like the maniacal, ruthless, unreasonable people that they are, of course, from the very hardline, normie, brainwashed perspective. And it's going to shock people. It is going to scare people. And that is when they're going to swoop in with the solution. I don't know what that's going to be, but you can bet that in times of crises, government will attempt to consolidate power and centralize that power. Now, I think one of the traps that a lot of people fall into, like my friend, who I very much respect on many, many levels, they fall into the trap of presuming that we're not just in a natural state of decay. They just presume that this is all everything's by design. Yet, find me one example of when any of our leaders have done something that is notably really intelligent and demonstrates ingenuity and innovation. Very seldom do they demonstrate capability to think many moves ahead or play the 4D chess that seemingly the authoritarian leaders, as we call them, of the East are adept at. Yet they think that these people control the world and everything in it. Here's what's happening from my point of view. There's three ways of looking at this, okay? His perspective is that everything is screwed because the elites are making it screwed. It is the typical populist point of view. There's another point of view that society, after generations of rapacious greed and mismanagement of our resources, is in a state of decay and deterioration. And as a result of that, the government just has a natural tendency, governments, institutions have a natural tendency to centralize power structures. The other solution, which I think is probably the most reasonable one, is that, not solution, but the other way of looking at this, is that it's both of those things, okay? That these things are functioning in tandem with one another, in that the government is actively encouraging the organic state of societal decay that already exists as a result of our cultural values, late stage capitalism, whatever you want to call it, the fourth turning. There's so many different names for it. So that's where we're at right now, and they don't want people to know how serious it is. It's obvious. I mean, $36 trillion in debt. We're already, we already got used to 35, and that was only a couple months ago. 36 trillion now in the United States. Okay, and everybody's, sitting there waiting in anticipation to see whether or not the CPI that is completely made up and fabricated, not representative of the reality of people's financial struggles whatsoever, goes up 0.01% or something like that, as if that really is that meaningful. Nonetheless, it's going to swing the market in one way or the other, because it's not even that it's manipulated, it's just that we're all collectively brainwashed and brainwashing each other. And right now, as it's 1 minute to midnight, from my point of view, that's very dangerous, because you have a media that is completely in a state of blackout about one of the greatest crises that the world faces today, that could lead to the end of our species. Maybe not the end of our species, but definitely set us back likely hundreds of years, okay? And nobody is talking about it. And it's not because they couldn't fill seats. It's not because they can't sell ads. They're not talking about it for a reason. They're not talking about it because they don't want to incite a panic. Because the government needs to prepare. If they incite a panic, watch what inflation does when people start stocking up on food. We know that the big bad bird flu is coming, and I'm not one of these people to minimize it. Again, really the most scientific view to take is that there's societal decay, and then there's government exploiting that decay, or institutions, corporations, individuals exploiting that for their own gain. So you have those two things. It's not just that bird flu doesn't exist and, they're just going to create something. Yeah, maybe something leaked from a lab or whatever. I mean, even if that was the case, you could argue that that was the result of societal decay as much as it's a result of some nefarious plan by a tightly grouped group of elites. So I would encourage people to seize upon this opportunity. As for the bird flu, I mean, yes, could that lead to higher food prices for chicken, meats, beef? Absolutely. It probably will lead to more centralization. Is that because of the fact that we've had monoculture and factory farming and big ag for all these years and it's finally just coming to a head? Well, we got to bear some of that responsibility too. It's not all about, the elite nefarious cabal that nobody can seem to exactly identify and pin down, but everybody likes to talk about institutions and three-letter names and these other poster boys like the Klaus Schwabs and the George Soroses. But, when it comes to really explaining the nexus of this cabal, where it lies, where the real power lies, nobody can really see them. Everybody will, they'll send out names like the Club of Rome and the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergs and the blah, 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 blah. I've heard it all before. But what's going on right now is that World War III, in its finality, because yes, we're already in World War III, but it's not about when World War III begins, it's about when World War III ends. Because World War III ends when the nukes drop. I'm talking about strategic nukes, okay? So we are closer than ever before. And I must emphasize this fact because it's fascinating from just a social media, social psychological point of view that we are closer than ever before, but it seems to be one of the issues that people are least interested in, which is just fascinating. The closer we get to it, it seems, people are even, less interested in it. So it's fascinating. But those who are paying attention, those who, were able to jump into this algorithm at the right time and are going down this rabbit hole, this spiral, you're not crazy. I mean, everything checks out. The data is there. Quantifiably, we are closer to the brink than ever before in history. Now, again, does that mean we're a year away, 10 years away, or a day away? I don't know, but it's still closer than we've ever been before. Pretty much all the boxes have been checked. And if you think that there's more boxes that need to be checked, feel free to let me know. Maybe Russia has to first give weapons to an adversarial country that will start launching those conventional weapons at us. Maybe Yemen gets some more sophisticated anti-aircraft, anti-air defense weaponry, or potentially more accurate cruise missiles from the Russians. There could be hypersonics. They might get something that is going to empower them, and then that is going to force, there might be a few more steps to go, if you know what I mean. Okay, maybe the F16s enter the conflict and it doesn't go parabolic right away. Maybe it's just that the F16s start getting shot down and it turns into an Abrams tank situation, but I highly doubt that because of the fact that these F16s are going to be stationed in Romania and Poland. That's why all the military has been put there. That's why they're sending Patriot missile defense systems in advance, for when they unleash them to protect against attacks. So they're forward deploying the Patriots so that if the Russians try, and that's the only reason why they're doing it now. Ask yourself, they could have did this long time ago, okay? They're doing it now because they know that the Russians might attempt to target the bases inside Poland and Romania where these things are based from. And in order to do that, not necessarily in all cases, but in Poland in particular, they could do something from Belarus, but they have to go through Ukrainian airspace. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of the minutiae, the specifics of the F-16s, on the use of NATO air bases by Ukrainian F-16s, yesterday it became known that some F-16 fighter jets, which will be transferred to the AFU, will be based not out of Ukrainian territory, but the air bases of the North Atlantic Alliance. So I talked about this yesterday, how what they're going to do, they're going to do this, I don't know, skipping stone technique, where basically the planes launch from Poland, maybe they just touch down on a Ukrainian runway really quickly, and then they lift off again. And now technically that plane lifted off from Ukraine. It's going to fly its sortie. It's going to bomb targets inside Russia, and then it's going to fly back to Poland. Okay? Now, number one, the Russians think these things they must presume that they're armed with nuclear weapons. They probably know they aren't. But, I mean, you never know what the Russians know. You never know what's really going on. But we'll presume that the Russians are aware that these likely don't have nuclear weapons, but they're posturing in such a way. So that means that they're going to be left with no other choice but to target those bases. So they're putting up all the Patriot missile defense systems in anticipation that this is going to be the move. Now, according to this Rybar force, which is a very pro-Russian military analyst group, they're saying that such a scenario was actually expected. The fighter jets are already in Romania, specifically at the Fetesti base, where the pilots are being trained. And never mind the pilots. It ain't going to be Ukrainian pilots. Why would a Ukrainian go into this plane when I've already explained this? Many of you maybe have not seen those videos where I explain this. Essentially, there are already people lining up to volunteer to fly the F-16s because they've never seen a peer-to-peer combat scenario. And I'm presuming that that's every Top Gun enthusiast's dream, to be in a peer-to-peer war and to fly, their F-16. So there's a lot of people lining up who have way more experience than these Ukrainian pilots. Why would you waste a plane on some guy who didn't really know how to fly it that well and who was uncomfortable flying it? These things take a lot of training, I would presume. And even if you do have 2 years of training, are you really ready? Do you really have somebody who has the emotional and just physical state of readiness in order to operate this very complicated system? While the people who've done it for 10, 20 years, it's such second nature. Why not give it to them? The Russians are never going to know. So you're going to have NATO pilots, NATO planes, flying from NATO bases, NATO ISR, NATO funding. It's NATO attacking Russia. End of story. The test flights from Romania in the direction of Odessa region have already been made more than once. F-16s flew over Tulsia, flew over Vilkove, and made circles over Snake Island. That's crazy. Thirdly, this is from the Russians saying this, okay? Now, why didn't they shoot these down? Did they not have the capability? Who knows? Thirdly, the fighters will be safer on the territory, or did they suspect that they were Romanian? That's probably why they didn't want to start World War III or finish World War III. Thirdly, the fighters will be safer on the territory of NATO countries. A strike on alliance airfields would lead to total escalation, which is why it was unofficially or officially announced that NATO infrastructure would be used by fighter jets to strike against Russia. So the clock is really ticking. It could happen any day now. And now the Russians are saying that they are changing their nuclear doctrine. According to Radoslaw Sikorski, the Polish foreign minister, there are around 100 tactical nuclear warheads being kept in Kaliningrad. Now, this has never really been proven officially, but that you have the Polish foreign minister saying that is interesting. I've talked about this probably 18 months ago. I showed you the map of where they're likely based out of. But now that that's mainstream, well, this ain't mainstream news. And that's the problem. That's a really big problem. And that's why this is all so strange. Why are they now lifting the ban on the Ukrainian Azov Brigade? Suddenly, of course, the one who's affiliated with the neo-Nazi far-right, they try to deny it here, but they made documentaries on it before, Canadian documentaries on it, I believe, or was it Canadian or British? It was one or the other. But this is a commonly understood fact, but the fact that they're trying to hide it, Guys, this is a very, very scary, like I feel like I'm in an episode of The Twilight Zone. I mean, this is the perfect example of that, where everything is pointing towards imminent nuclear Armageddon, and everybody is just walking around listening to Andrew Tate rant about crypto in his boxer shorts and smoking a cigar and talking about how he can crash the market and all this stuff. And what else? You got Hello Kitty and Mike Tyson and Jake Paul and Hunter Biden. Like, these things are completely meaningless in the grand scheme of things. That's what people are fixated on. I mean, just go on any mainstream media page and really just take a look at what's on there. Knowing what you know about all this, there's a reason why they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars. You would think the thing that they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on would be what everybody was fixated on. But of course, it is not. Now, arguably, that hundreds of billions is a drop in the bucket compared to the trillions of dollars worth of financial hegemony that they are destined to lose if they lose this war. If they lose this war, it's not just about losing the war, it's about losing global financial hegemony. Because those dominoes will start to fall if China and Russia can assert their dominance and chart a new path with BRICS. And eventually, midnight is going to come. But there's been a delay. How long has this video been? 31 minutes? And it's been a real long last minute, hasn't it? Well, I would encourage you to continue with your preparedness efforts. You know, even if only for practical purposes, in Alberta right now, in Calgary, in fact, there is a boil water advisory. Is it a boil water advisory, or can they not even drink the water? I don't even have the notes with me. But it's always good to have portable water filtration, to have a gravity filter in your home, probably one of the most practical investments that anybody can have. And we had somebody recently thank us for supplying them with various fire extinguishing equipment. They were able to extinguish a fire before it spread in their household. And hearing messages like that just reminds me of, you know, the importance of the work that we're doing here, and to know that we are in fact saving people's lives, because this is better than insurance. Preparedness is the insurance that you're always going to find a use for. Maybe not a fire extinguisher, but you know, definitely every prepper should have a fire extinguisher. If you're prepared for nuclear war and you don't have a fire extinguisher in your home, then you got to get your priorities straight. I'll post links in the description if you want to support the channel, support small and local business. Don't shop at Amazon, don't shop at Walmart, shop at CanadianPreparedness.com. You get better stuff, you're going to get better deals, and I assure you, you're going to get better service, because Amazon's service lately, I mean, a lot of us order from Amazon out of laziness. But I've noticed now, if you want to file a claim, or if you want to talk to the distributor, the person who's selling you the thing through Amazon's fulfilled by merchant service, you got to jump through all kinds of hoops. It used to be very easy. And that's how they loop people in, with the ease and convenience of it. But when you really look at the prices, a lot of brands don't like going through Amazon, because of course they get gouged with all these types of fees, and Amazon likes to control things. So, you know, put your money where your mouth is. If you believe in, you know, the libertarian ideal, support small business, support the individual over the interests of the state and the emerging oligopoly. And just get your shit together while the getting is good, because it's obvious what's happening. Just remember those three things. They always lie. They have lied. They're never going to tell you the truth when crisis is approaching. We're in a state of crisis right now, and the media is not talking about it at all. Those three things should tell you everything you need to know about what's about to happen. Keep prepping, guys.